You're very welcome to the Firm and Fast Golf Podcast. I'm your host, Shane Darby. Before I recorded the very first episode of the Firm and Fast Golf Podcast, I created a wish list of possible future guests. Thus far, this original list has gradually been exhausted. However, until very recently, one guest remained elusively busy due to her passion for designing and building golf courses. Over the past few weeks, today's guest has afforded me the opportunity to pick her brain on all things golf. More specifically, some of the projects that she has worked on in Ireland, Scotland, the United States and beyond. Her early days in Augsburg, Germany, studying landscape architecture in Munich and Sheffield, hickory golf, and an awful lot more. It is my great pleasure to introduce this episode, which features Angela Moser, architect, shaper, world traveller, dozer and digger driver. Many thanks for tuning in. We both very much hope you enjoy our al fresco chat, recorded recently in the garden of the Old Glen Bar in Glen Village, County Donegal. Many thanks to Cormac, Kieran, Louise and the team for facilitating this recording. If you are ever in Donegal, you simply must get here for a bite to eat. You will not regret it. Just a final word to the wise: prior booking is essential to be sure of a table at the Old Glen. There'll be a link in the show notes for booking purposes. We hope you enjoy the chat. Angela Moser, you're very welcome to the Firm and Fast Golf Podcast. The Gates as dear. Or for our Anglophile listeners, how are you?
Yeah, really good, thank you.
I believe you're just back from a wee trip to Norway, specifically to Lofoten Links. Needless to say, Lofoten was designed by English architect Jeremy Turner, starting as a 6-hole loop with additional holes added over time until the finished article was in full view by 2014. I understand that you may now be consulting for the club with Jeremy.
Yeah, it's really in conjunction with Jeremy. I was just approached to help out and address some problems, mainly tees, some processes, how they go through the season, and just help.
Cool. But how was the trip? Did you play, or were we just whizzing around in a Sand Pro and an excavator, I think, building a few tees?
Yeah, it's a complicated tee box renovation. I didn't play golf. A complicated tee box renovation because the tee boxes are tiny. I think that's where they were saving some money in the start. And now they get so much play that they have to resort some of the tees every now and then, and they don't have enough space for it. So having so many people come and play and wanting to experience the midnight sun at Lofoten, which is really cool, just has a problem in demand and what they can offer, and we're addressing that. So building a couple of new tee boxes so we can move people to those new tee boxes, and then readdressing the old ones. Overall, they're getting a lot more tee space, and then also different angles and options to move players around.
It is on the bucket list, surprise, surprise. In terms of the growing season there, it must be pretty short.
It is very short, yeah. Like I was just up there and it was the end of May, and they're really just coming out of the winter season. So they're starting to grow now. And I think they have like 3 months of growing season and a pretty tough winter. Obviously, it's getting pretty cold up there. Although they have the advantages of the Gulf Stream, so it really hits Lofoten on the coast. But yeah, it's a pretty short and compact season, and that's, again, some of the problem. You don't have a lot of players that you can move around over a long period. You have like a lot of people playing, and that's a sacrifice on the course. And again, that's why we redo a couple of tee boxes, so all the people that are coming don't play like a hacked up tee box, but they can actually enjoy the place.
Presuming it's still predominantly fescue there?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So it's proper fine leaf turf.
Yeah, it's absolutely links turf, and it plays like that. Like you want to hit your bump and run shot in, that's all possible. And I think that makes it such a cool place.
Obviously, looking at pictures, there's a lot of exposed rock and stuff in terms of off the beaten track, or certainly off the fairway.
Exposed rocks and a lot of heather.
All right, okay. I wasn't expecting to say that. So, actually, just another question, just apropos the heather. How do you think heather works in relation to links golf? I mean, it's not something you generally see a huge amount of.
No, but you have, I think I've read somewhere, like the ultimate plot of land would be the dunes to build a links course. Then the next step would be, if you go inland because you can't build something on the seaside, then you would go find some sandy soil and have some interesting ground. And most of that is like the sand belts around London. That's heathland. So you get heather, and it's such a interesting texture and so beautiful. And then ultimately you get down to tree-lined golf courses with heavy soil. So it's just a step down. And when you're talking about links conditions, I think, you have the wind, you have firm and fast ground, so you can play your ground shots.
One thing with the heather, it's not great to play at it. You need to adjust your expectations. I guess I'm speaking from experience last year.
That's your experience.
Yeah, you just don't go in there. We'll get on to your balling in due course. Just an initial question that I'd like to get your input or certainly assessment of. So there's a Bobby Jones quotation with regard to golfers and golf course architecture. And he said, every golfer worthy of the name should have some acquaintance with the principles of golf course design, not only for the betterment of the game, but for their own selfish enjoyment. I'm just wondering, do you agree with Mr. Jones' statement? And if so, what's the payback to golfers who've developed a semblance of an acquaintance to golf course architecture?
Well, I do agree with Mr. Jones there. I think as an architect, we're trying to get into the player's head. And if the player is capable of seeing what we're trying to ask from him and then also deliver, which is mostly another story, I think there is some excitement of that. And I believe that's what Mr. Jones refers to selfish enjoyment, the adventure of taking on the task that a golf course architect is asking. Obviously, there are multiple ways to conquer it and approach a hole, and you just have to find your way. And if you can see the differences, I think there's some smart play there.
In preparation for our chat today, I translated a couple of interviews that you recently did with some German golf publications. I'm assuming that Google Translate was correct in drawing my attention to the fact that you were a keen baker.
Yes, that's true.
Okay, that's half the battle then. As you know, my German is limited to Ich heiße schön, ich bin 12 Jahre alt, ich wohne in Dublin, etc., etc. I'm obviously not 12 years of age, but you get the picture. It seems to me that there may be similarities to baking a cake and designing and building golf courses.
Yeah. I don't think the comparison works with the design, but whenever I'm spreading topsoil, it reminds me of chocolate gloss over my Christmas cookies. And
you're famous apparently for your Christmas cookies. Allegedly, according to Instagram anyway.
Apparently. Yeah, and then if you're getting into the construction methods, sure, you can compare it to layering a cake or something, but it's not really related to design. But sure, yeah. After,
I guess, 18 months plus of trying to arrange this conversation, the stars have actually aligned recently, not including this morning. We've actually found ourselves in the same place on 4 separate occasions over the past few weeks. It's fitting, needless to say, that those locations were all either at or adjacent to the Rosapenna Golf Resort, or indeed the Old Glen Bar, where we are this morning. We'll get on to your most recent exploits at the new number 10 course at Pinehurst Resort in the Carolinas, but given we're here in Donegal, it seems fitting to first reminisce about your involvement here in Downings on the relatively new Kid on the Irish Links block. I understand you were fortunate to be involved from day one, and the first official Renaissance visit in March 2013, just after the Caseys purchased the property from the National Asset Management Agency. What do you remember about that first visit?
So I played some London Heathland golf courses, and then I came up here, and I just thought it was Baltic up here. It was very quiet. It was pre-season.
It's always like this. The sun's out. What are you talking about?
Chirping.
Birds chirping. Tractors going by.
Yeah, it was very early in the season, golfing-wise, so it was fairly quiet. And we walked the site for 4 days in the mornings and then in the evenings, just to find the holes that Tom found on a map and see if they're any good and how you can connect the dots and figure out the routing, find the boundaries to any adjacent sites that we might wanted to get in, but are basically a no-no. And it was just hiking through hip-deep moss. You sink in and walk up that hillside and enjoy the views. And it was stunning.
I got stuck in some of that moss yesterday. Not stuck, but I played yesterday, as you know, and I said I wasn't going to take any photographs, but that didn't work out. So I was trying to get, actually, there's that tee box you pointed out to me a couple of weeks ago at the back of the ninth tee up there. And anyway, actually, beg your pardon, the right-hand side of the sixth, I went up over that one and thought I was getting out to the seventh, but I didn't end up there. Anyway, by the by, I'm just making the point that it's not very nice, that moss stuff.
But you didn't play there, right?
No, I didn't play.
Okay, good. I was like, a little worried there.
No. The ball was nowhere near. I just had the bag on my back in terms of taking photographs, whatever. But yeah, it's
right.
I can imagine it was pretty wild in terms of what you came across and sort of going off the old fairways. It was.
Yeah, that's basically the only thing that was easy to walk because they've been mowing the grass on the previous golf courses. That was 36 holes. Therefore, they were able to maintain a status as a golf course, which was great because permitting-wise, that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I can remember hosting Clyde actually on episode 4 with Ali McIntosh and Frank Casey Jr. And I think, you know, when you were going ahead with the project, I think he was one of the first to arrive. And I think he mentioned snapping PTO shafts on tractors. So wild was what they had to do in terms of flailing out the rest of the fairways, if that makes any sense. So I can only imagine what it was like. I'm assuming that the site that Patrick's is on, which I think is about 320 acres, is that the largest site for golf that you've worked on thus far?
No, actually, I've been working with Gil Hans for a stint, and Ubi Match Club is probably bigger. If you're talking about just 18 holes, that would be one to point out. And then the recent Pinehurst Sand Mines is sitting on 900 acres. Obviously, there will be a lot more than just one golf course going on, but number 10 is about 290 acres.
Just wondering, for those that perhaps haven't, for whatever reason, been to St. Patrick's yet, how would you describe the course for the uninitiated in terms of what they might expect to find?
It's between an old links course and some width, and I think it has its own right and soul in this country and rankings of Irish links courses. It's very different, I would say, but then also we incorporated like some of the traditional look and features and the style of bunkers. So I think you have to be open-minded, especially when it comes to tee boxes, because they're free form. They're not really lining you up. But then, you know, when it comes to like bunkering, if you're looking at some of the bunkers, we're trying to be very natural and then bringing in some of the Merim to bleed out into the native and blend in, and you'd create something similar to the blowouts and the scars that animals would have created. I think that's a different approach than a cookie cutter revetted bunker version, but then let nature take care of some of the shaping and maintaining some of the shapes. So I'm pretty sure you'll see some of the bunker sand getting blown around, and maybe it's like covering some of the fairway and stuff, but we're just giving it a head start into one direction, and then Mother Nature's taking care of it. And maybe she's disagreeing with some of the shapes and just creating some of her own. But if you're open-minded enough, it's not a problem that you have to fix, but you just run with it.
Just apropos of the bunkers, just something that's come into my head. I was in a few of them yesterday, which is never good, particularly some of the ones I found. But the actual surface itself seems to be quite compact. Actually, and also the sand, the contrast between the sand on Sandy Hills and St. Patrick's, although they're almost right beside each other, is completely different. Sandy Hills sand seems to be an awful lot more yellow.
That's interesting. That never occurred to me, honestly. But, I haven't been in a bunker on our last round. So
You haven't played Sandy Hills recently.
I haven't played Sandy Hills recently, no.
You need to go and check that out. There's a little earwig for you. Just wondering if you can speak to the collaborative effort at Patrick's. I know obviously Mr. Doak was involved. I think Eric Iverson was the lead associate. Yourself and Clyde Johnson, obviously, interns, contractor. I know it's a collaborative effort from a creative perspective and also from an implementation perspective. And you might speak to the advantages that sort of a collaboration represents.
Well, you're missing out on a couple.
Sorry.
So there's also Blake Conant.
Sorry, Blake.
Brian Schneider and Brian Slawnik, and Don Placek was here as well. And then one big point you missed out was mentioning a superintendent. We're always working with grow-in superintendents that understand architecture, and George Shelley was absolutely taking pride and big role in this. So he should be up there with Eric, actually. But how the roles were distributed, well, Tom was here until COVID hit, basically, and we were able to get all the greens approved by September 2019. So that was really helpful and had enough time to grow in for opening at, when was it, 2021? And Eric has been working with Tom for such a long time that he and Tom have their own language and they understand and know what they like and what they envision. So it was pretty easy to just trust Eric and check in with Eric since he was running the job anyways and see, what did you think here? What's the plan over here? Trying to pitch ideas and get some information about what is envisioned and staying on the track. Our interns helped us finish, shape some of the stuff like sand pro work and hand raking and edging and all that kind of stuff. They were between the handwork and finishing work. Every now and then they were thrown onto an excavator, which is fairly normal for an intern with us. And then they helped out the contractor, drove the tractors and trailers. So they get a pretty good first taste of how many aspects this job has. It's not just shaping some cool contours. It's like, how can you mow it? How do you seed it? Like, what do you seed? And yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. And you have to gain like a pretty wide understanding of golf course architecture and construction and maintenance. So it's really not just one thing and not just one-sided with the design.
You mentioned COVID there, and that was obviously you were here before, during, and after. You were stuck in Downings for the COVID lockdown in Ireland.
I wasn't completely stuck here. Like I still had a couple things to do in Germany and I had a project there. And so I tried to travel very, very respectfully in my own car and a ferry and just basically stayed just by myself. But I actually enjoyed it up here because
There are worse places to be.
it's so peaceful. No, let's start again. It's a miserable place. You don't want to come here.
Stay away. You'll hate it.
Yeah, that's why you come here so often, right? No, it's absolutely magical up here. And I just love how peaceful it is. And we're so lucky to get some of the amazing projects that we've been to. There's something really philosophical even about being on site and then just, it sounds like I'm not working, but like watching the tide go out and in. And, at the Renaissance Club, there was a lobster boat that just came out every morning and then put out the traps. And then around lunchtime, I guess, they picked up the lobster cages. But, it's similar here. Like I remember playing golf. One of my first rounds actually on Old Tom Morris was with Frank Casey Jr. and one of our interns, Cal Moore. And you go up to 15T and you have this amazing view over Sheephaven Bay. And it was after work round of golf. So, sun is setting and it's just magical. And I kind of zoned out. Like those lads were just chatting and chirping away. And I just stand there and I just absolutely embrace the moment where I'm at. And I have those moments every now and then, and I just love it up here. So,
when I was up here the last time, as you know, I was with Simon Pope and Richard Pennell. I've got a picture of Richard actually on the 18th tee at Old Tom. And at that stage, I think he probably played 180 holes. It was almost as if he'd become a part of the golf course. So he's just staring into the middle distance, just completely in a trance. And it does it to you up here. Like, I had a similar experience on 16 on St. Patrick's yesterday. It's just, the sense of place is just...
It's unreal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unreal. So why wouldn't you come up here? So that's the thing. Like, why wouldn't you spend some time up here? And I know it's a little bit out of the way, but you get so much out of it, and I just love it.
We played the front line at St. Patrick's recently. It was a real treat, obviously, to accompany you around the links. Additional thanks are also due to you for allowing me to salvage a sporting draw on the 9th with an assist from Chris Breen, who I think probably put you off on the 8th green. Let's put it that way. I look forward to a rematch sometime soon. Somehow I don't fancy my chances. I understand that prior to our round, you last saw the golf course in September 2022. Just interested to understand what your thoughts are on the maturation process that's much in evidence as St. Patrick's moves through its 4th season since opening.
Yeah, it matured really well, and the current superintendent, Chris Breen, is having a big part in that. I played it in September 22 as we had our Renaissance Cup here, and it was just after coming from New Zealand and building TRA links. And it was just such a treat to come back here and see the place and really see a lot of smiling faces, and just like yourself, sometimes miserable, sometimes smiling.
I'm never miserable. The victory's been on the golf course, Angela.
Right.
I'm hanging on to that gratefulness since COVID, so I'm at least trying to anyway. You used an interesting analogy when we were out on the golf course in terms of that maturation process, and you likened it to having pretty serious surgery and that it takes time for a wound to heal.
What we're doing with heavy equipment and going into an area, and just even if it's a slight alteration, you're disturbing an area. So you can compare it to a surgery. And everything in this world just needs time to heal. And I think it's fair to say that it's the same with a golf course. You can't expect it to be absolutely perfect from day one. And you can only expect it to be perfect from day one if you gave it time to heal prior to opening it. But that's part of it. I mean, a golf course needs about 3 years to really completely mature and grow in. And I think we're at a stage now where the golf course is at its absolute best. So, yeah.
I had a conversation with John Casey when I was up here the last time, and he made the point that irrespective of when they opened, it would always be too soon.
Yeah.
So I've been fortunate enough to see the place from opening. And the nice thing with coming back is it's always an adventure, because it's never going to look like that again.
But that's nature, isn't it? Like I said before, Mother Nature is taking on, she's drying out a spot, she's moving some sand around, maybe there's a washout or something. If you're open-minded enough, you're not just restricted to, it has to be this one way and that's it. It's always good to come back and see it with new eyes and see how it's doing. And there might be areas that are overgrown a little bit, and maybe Chris hasn't cut it back or something. I think it's fair to say that, and agree with John, like it's never perfect, but what is perfection in nature?
We mentioned earlier that you've been involved in the project since the first site visit back in 2013. I suspect that creating any golf course from scratch may be a little bit like childbirth. I'm wondering how challenging it is to hand the metaphorical child back to its owners and operators. Having been involved for somewhere nearing 20% of your life on Earth at the time, I'm just wondering, do you miss it? Is that why you come back? And obviously we've said it's a very special place, so it's no wonder you come back.
It's actually pretty easy to hand it over when you know it's taken care of and the ideas is understood. It's nice to come back to places you put a lot of effort and sweat in. So yeah, it's a special place and it's easy to come back to.
The backdrops of Errigal, Muckish, Hornhead, Moore Beach, Mulroy Bay and Downings Bay obviously play a supporting role in the drama that unfolds around the golf courses at Rosapenna. In general terms, I'm just wondering how you would assess the importance of backdrops and perhaps reveals in creating drama, intrigue, and maybe most importantly, memorability to golf holes?
You just mentioned the memorability is pretty big. It's easier to remember golf holes if you can say, oh, the par 4 that plays straight into Sheephaven Bay. Sure, that's a dogleg 14th. A very good example is Bandon Trails. I thought Bill Corr and Ben Crenshaw did an amazing job taking you by the hand to explore the different places of the site. It's almost like a hike. Is the hike fun if you're going straight up the mountain, or would you rather go through an area that has a lake and have a view, and then you slowly climb up and turn around and then you see something different? You're basically getting entertained on the way up, and you hopefully don't really notice that you've been hiking that much and slowly climbing uphill. But yeah, once you're up there, you really enjoy your views. And it's similar with golf course architecture and the routing, especially. Like, you want to have a couple of moments where you reveal something, you have some backdrops. Sure. I think it's all about being enclosed by, here, for example, it would be the dunes. You're enclosed and you're in a bowl and you don't really see anything. And then if you have a big reveal afterwards, that's even more dramatic. And golf course architecture, and especially the routing of a golf course, I also think you can compare it a lot of times to classical music. So if you have a symphony, it's not just one depth of one particular instrument. It has like multiple things. So you have multiple routes. You have the big drum and the big aha at the end or somewhere in the middle. And you have something that adds up to the drama. And I think it's fairly similar to compare it to golf course architecture. Of course, backdrops are important. Reveals are important. Drama, intrigue, memorability is very important. But I think as a whole package, that creates a really great experience of playing a golf course.
With regard to the greens at Rosapenna, C.B. McDonald suggested that greens to a golf course are similar to faces in portraits. You might speak to the variety of green sites on offer at St. Patrick's, from Clyde's crazy rendition on 11, the kicker slope heaven at 17. And I think I mentioned to you yesterday, I found a wing on the 4th green, which I didn't realize existed yesterday.
Yeah.
You might just speak to the variety of green sites that you guys have presented collectively at St. Patrick's.
A lot of it is Tom finding the green sites on a map. He finds fantastic location for greens because he understands what the terrain is doing. And of course, you have to check once it's cleared. You're rechecking, like, what is the ground actually doing? But it's his first step of finding different green sites. So, for example, 3 is a bowl. So you'd have a different type and variety and feeling of the green to hole 4 or 2. 2 is on top of the dune ridge and it's way more exposed than 3 is. So you have a completely different type of green to start with. It's a different feeling. It plays differently. Then, of course, you go in and think about what kind of internal contours the green should have and how bold you want to have it. But if you have 18 really bold greens, that's no good. Like, you want to have variety in it and have something that is maybe a little bit flatter, maybe a little bit steeper in places. And relatively. Well, you mentioned Clyde's crazy green on 11. I don't think it's that crazy, actually. I think it's pretty cool. Like,
well, as long as you're in the right place, it's not crazy.
It's just a beautiful example of creativity, and not just on his side, but on the golfer's side. Like, if you can be creative, that's a nice part about building greens and interesting greens is not everyone hits it 300 yards, but everyone can be creative with putts. And obviously, Clyde is testing that on 11.
Tested me a couple of weeks ago. Anyway, there's videos to prove it as well. They're up on social media.
Oh,
anyway,
God.
Yeah.
You do that?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I got stuck up on the left-hand side towards the back with a pin down the bowl. And I played the right putt, but I left it on top of the ridge. It never went down. So yeah. Anyway, so
no.
Thanks, Chris, for your $5 million. Literally, I was 6 inches away from actually making it over the top of the ridge. But anyway. Like that green, Clyde. Like that green. Listen, I know the team at Renaissance take inspiration from many of the best green sites. Just wondering, are there any specific greens that the team drew inspiration from for the green sites at St. Patrick's?
Not so much for the greens, actually. So at least not that I'm aware of. But for the bunkers, we had a very simple but charming style in mind. And the likes of Royal County Down and at County Down, you have the heather grow a little bit into the bunker faces, and it's such a charming place, and bunkering is really nice. So we tried to have a similar look in terms of don't have heather, but we have some of the mosses, some of the native plants, and obviously some of the marram. So we tried to do that and be creative with it and run with that idea. So fairly simplistic, not too many bays or too round. So very natural, easy looking bunkers. And I think that's what we went with.
The greens will obviously not be to everybody's taste. It takes all sorts. It probably won't surprise you that I've had a number of conversations over the past few weeks, which inert to some of the following commentaries. Tricked up, bulldozer needed for 5 or 6 of the greens, too extreme, one-upmanship between the shapers, too slow from a pace perspective. Listen, most of these comments appear to be bandied about by people who may have only played the course on one occasion. So, look, they're entitled to their opinion, but they seem to think, they're conditioned to think, in fact, flat greens, revetted faces and bunkers on links golf courses. They want a sanitized adventure. Maybe they're fun sponges. Who knows? They are, of course, entitled to their own opinions, as are we.
So you said tricked up, bulldozer needed for 5 to 6 greens. Again, I would go back to not everyone can hit a long drive. It's a creativity in putting. Everyone can putt and be creative and try something rather than just go from A to B in a straight line. So having someone who can imagine how this putt reads and how the ball will roll, I think that's a big talent. So why should the talent only be reduced to hitting a long drive and long shots?
That's one thing in playing with you a couple of weeks ago. There's 3 or 4 different ways to get to some pins. I remember, I don't know what how it was. Obviously, it was on the front line, needless to say, but it could have been 4. Actually, it could have been 5, actually. And I saw one break. You actually went in a different direction.
Yeah, I remember that one.
And you're kind of there going, I didn't see that. So actually, you're right in terms of just keep your eyes open in terms of everything that you see may not be exactly what you think you see, but by the same token, there may be other ways of doing what you want to do if you just are a little bit more open-minded.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's all about being open-minded and just sometimes it's just, hey, let's have fun, try this out. Does that work? I can see there's a little nook here, and if I put it there, then
but
it
you also
actually
have the advantage of some of the shaping, if you like, and whoever it might have been, Clyde will go, wait till you can see what I've done here. So you do have that advantage that maybe you didn't do the work, but you probably were involved in this discussion about does that work or not 4 or 5 years ago.
Right. But then again, like if I go to a place that I haven't built, I'm trying to be open-minded and just look around and see if there's a different way. And I think that's the whole fun about, we're actually going back to Mr. Jones' statement about having a basic understanding about golf course architecture, because that's all it is. You go and travel places and see different places and play different places. And every one of these places have something different. And you just have to be open-minded and figure out what the architect wanted you to do. And I think it's a treat if you go to a place where you can't really put your finger on it and you have to play it over and over and still find something. Like yourself yesterday, the 4th green has actually a wing. Like, what the heck?
Don't think about it too hard because your head will start hurting, as mine did last night. The joys of being out in the golf course by yourself for 4.5 hours. I was at least playing golf, thankfully. Do you want to address any other of those general comments?
again, like everyone is entitled to their own opinion, and that's totally fine. But on the same token, there are people out there who like this. And it would be very sad if we're all just building one type of golf course and you travel to America and play a golf course and it's exactly the same thing as over here. Americans traveling over here to see Irish links golf courses. And you can make a point like, is this a real Irish links golf course? If you compare it like to the likes of Portmarnock and might have a couple greens that lay more flat on the ground. But I think that's the beauty of it. You always have to go with what the site gives you. And over here, I think we had a beautiful site that has a lot of contour, and it would be odd to just make like really flat greens. The best example is really Clyde's 11th green, because that shelf on the right was there. He was just brave enough to leave it there and not make it absolutely flat, incorporate it and make it work. And that's all what we do, is we're trying to incorporate what is there and going back to Tom finding these amazing green sites and then incorporate what is there to, okay, let's make it work.
Playing there yesterday was in northwesterly, which I hadn't played the place in before.
It's a tough one.
It helps on 2 holes. That's about it. Like, it's wild, and some of Chris's pin placements were a little bit wild too, just relative to the wind. And you just start going, I know what I have to do here. I probably don't have the ability to hit the shot, but you can see it. But like, they're going, wind. Like, how do I even get back there? I mean, case in point, 10 was on that shelf on the left, and like, you really had to try and bank it in from the left to try and keep it up there. I ended up 40 yards left. I tried to do the right thing, and like even 13 was back left. And you just never had enough club to. No matter what you hit, you still couldn't get there. Like, I had a 6 iron or something like that, and ended up short. But like, it's just funny how the different wind fundamentally changes the golf course. Absolutely,
yeah. It's amazing how many factors actually change a golf course. And I think that's the beauty of it. Like, you can't compare a golf course with like a tennis court. There's so many factors that make this interesting, and you want to come back to and try your best again. See if you can accomplish something this time.
I'll be keeping an eye on the weather forecast and just avoiding the place in northwesterly winds. Look, just picking up on what you said about Portmarnock, I think and if you look at the variety there, I mean, there's a lot of variety. There's some convex greens, there's some back to fronts. It's very angle driven. They're offset greens, so it's actually about that sense of place that you really were talking about previously. Portmarnock's greens fit Portmarnock, and St. Patrick's greens fit St. Patrick's.
And that is basically the goal. I mean, it would be weird if you're trying to copy like one of those greens and then maybe throw in a little bit of North Berwick, and I don't know. So it's just something else, and it just needs to talk to the place, and it needs to fit to the place. And I think, well, my opinion is, everyone is entitled to their opinion. My opinion is that it fits the place.
I'm not going to disagree. So I'm just going to recycle a Father Ted analogy that I'm pretty sure I used when I hosted Ali, Frank and Clyde Johnson on episode 4, when we were discussing the birth of St. Patrick's links. The scene in question relates to an exasperated Father Ted explaining to Father Dougal the difference between a small model cow that he's holding in his hand and a cow that's out the window of the caravan, but is far away. Needless to say, Dougal, who's a bit dim, didn't get the difference between something that was small and something else that was larger but far away. I guess I'm getting at the design notion of scale and how this has been utilised at St. Patrick's. The more you look, the more you see it in evidence. Perspective appears to be warped with design cunning, consideration, misdirection and subterfuge. I'm just wondering which design elements at St. Patrick's best illustrate this idea of small and far away.
Yeah, I think the blowout bunkers are one of the things that you could compare to the Father Ted analogy. Crystal Downs is a great example. At Crystal Downs, Mackenzie built a couple of bunkers in the distance behind a green, far in the distance. On the front 9, and you're on the back 9, and you're looking at it, and those bunkers are just behind the green, and it looks like the trouble is right there, but it's actually so far away. And it's just the look of it and the placement. And it doesn't really affect you on any other hole on the front nine, some of the bunkers or blowouts and scrapes that he created. But it's just elemental, like for the hole on the back nine, because it's in the backdrop of your shot and you're standing on a tee and you see like so much sand around the green, but you don't really get that the bunker in the back is actually so far away. So I'm getting to St. Patrick. There are so many beautiful natural blowouts, and Mother Nature did an amazing job. And when we got in and we built the greens, sometimes it was just a little bit too disconnected from those blowout bunkers in the distance. If you play down 16, you see the blowout behind the right side of 2 green. And it's beautiful, but it just feels like there's so much in between. So to give that a little bit more of the feel that it's closer, we scratched up some ground and tried to make it feel like some cattle herded there. And you see a little bit of sand just behind the green, and it kind of connects between the blowout and the distance and 16 green. And it's funny, it's like in middle ground. It's between 8 green and 9 tee, but that's basically creating the background of 16 green. So I think that's a pretty good example of that. And then if you're playing 4 green, you see 5 green and 15 all stacked up. And it's just beautiful to see other golf holes. And I think it adds excitement to like, oh, I can't wait to get there. And you're excited to get to those holes and to the back nine. And you turn around and you see the golf course that you've been to, and it's like, oh yeah, this was really great, and can't wait to play it again. So yeah, it's pretty funky how that analogy really works out in many ways.
I think you have that 8th from the 8th tee. You have it with 7 green and 2, or sorry, 7 green and 1, isn't it?
7 and 1, yeah.
7 and 1, yeah. So
right next to each other.
Yeah, and it's just that layering that just to bring it back to Mackenzie in relation to foreground, middle ground, background, and that stacking of visuals on top of each other is just crazy. It's a work of art as opposed to a golf course.
Well, a golf course is a work of art.
Yeah. Sorry, I stumbled over that. You're right, it is. Just maybe a quick word about the Caseys. Obviously, knowing them for some time, I can imagine they were pretty good clients.
Yeah, they're incredible hosts. And I think it's one reason why everyone really likes coming back is they just make everyone feel very welcomed and happy over here. So having them as clients was great. They came to the site so many times. They brought us tea and coffee and whatever our little hearts desired, really. We were able to play a lot of golf together. We had a lot of dinners, and you can just tell that they're so excited and they're really interested in golf course architectures. The client is able to really communicate with us what they're seeking, what they want, right? And that's super helpful because then you can just go back to the site and just think about like, okay, you know that Frank and John are both really good players. And every now and then you just put something in there to just spark the interest. They're the biggest employer in the region and they're looking out for their community. So it's just great to be here.
What specifics, if any, did you learn from your involvement in St. Patrick's that you've sort of banked away for future use?
The specific that I learned here is trust Eric. He really knows what he's talking about. He knows golf so well and golf course architecture. He's such a great designer on his own, really. I'm so glad he got so much design credit for it because, as we pointed out earlier, because of COVID, Tom wasn't really involved with finishing the project, but he approved all the greens. What that meant is like a lot of communication between Tom and Eric, and then Eric explaining it to me in plain words, since English is not my native language, what the idea is. And every now and then he would just sketch something. It's like, just believe in yourself. And he's a great motivator. So it's like, you can build some really cool bunkers and just do it. Trust the process and let it sit. let Mother Nature do a little bit of her magic. And I think some of the bunkers really turned out great. And the best part was when Eric came back after the lockdown and he looked at some of the bunkers and he had this massive smile on his face. And he's like, yeah, this is what I'm talking about. So that was great. And so, yeah, trust Eric, trust the process.
I just checked with Frank Casey recently. There's still availability, green fee and stay and play packages available at Rosapenna throughout the remainder of the 2024 season. For listeners who's interested in playing or staying, or both, your best bet is to contact hotel reception to discuss your requirements. I know you travelled around Ireland during your extended stay here. Just wondering where you went and what you saw.
As far south as Old Head, then up the entire west coast, north coast, back down to Dublin. So I'm missing inland courses and south of Dublin.
Was there anything in particular that struck you about golf in these parts?
How great your links courses are and how much I would like to preserve them from being changed. The variety of architects brings enough change and interest. But you have Mackenzie, you have Simpson, you have Cole, you have such a variety of golf course architects. And again, every golf course architect brings something else to the table. And keep that variety. Don't make it all the same.
Right, we're going to take a look at your early days for a second. So you're originally from Augsburg in Bavaria, sharing that hometown with another German golfing great, Bernhard Langer, who despite a stellar 52-year career, I don't think locally gets the recognition of others such as Franz Beckenbauer, Michael Schumacher, or even Boris Becker. By way of context to Langer's relative anonymity in his home country, you might speak of golf's popularity in Germany.
Yeah, I think unfortunately Bernhard won the Masters and became world number one in the wrong year. Boris Becker won Wimbledon, and tennis is and was much bigger in Germany than golf. Golf is growing and it had a massive boom in the 90s, but especially back then and even now, I don't think he's getting really the recognition that he deserves. I mean, he's such a legend and he had so many victories and he's still, up until his Achilles injury, he won so many tournaments and he's the US senior champion. I can't wait to see what he's doing at Pinehurst. Actually, it'll be interesting to see how he's doing over there. It's just amazing what he has accomplished. And if I'm fair, back in the day when I started to play golf when I was 10, merely through an accident. My parents basically threw my brother and I into a summer holiday program of our city, and there was pottery classes and dancing classes and stuff. And there was a 3-day golf camp. So that's kind of how I started playing golf and how I got into golf. Down the road, kids practice on the range and with our pro. And at the end of the range, there was this guy practicing, and that was Bernhard Langer. And my pro was asking very humble if it's okay if the kids are just watching him. And frankly, I didn't even know what the Masters are and what a major means. Sure, I was 10 years and didn't really know what that means. But if you're exposed to someone like that and you see him practice and put in a lot of effort, and he's so passionate, but still humble and grounded, it's pretty amazing.
I think he turned pro at 16.
He was a caddy in Augsburg, again, on that range that I was just talking about. Back then, it was a 9-hole golf course. And in the archives of Augsburg, you would find the reports of Bernhard Langer being the best caddy that they have. And he was a schoolboy. So he would walk out to the golf course from Anhausen and caddy for the members there on the 9-hole golf course, and then walk back home. And I was after school. So that's how he made a little bit of money. And he was the best caddy and then also the best golfing caddy, actually. So the caddies were allowed to play golf every now and then, and they had a caddy tournament, apparently, and he won that. So he actually shot really low, and that's when he went over to Munich Golf Club and turned pro, and ever since just started his career.
He's a machine, but as I alluded to earlier on, you are as well. A golfer of some talent. Well, with both modern, maybe not with the putter, but Sorry, I couldn't resist. A golfer's some talent, though, all the same, with both modern and period equipment, but we'll get onto that in a wee while. Just wondering if you recall any particular illuminating light bulb moments in relation to golf course design over those early years.
So after driving range experience there in the 90s and 2000s, there were too many young people playing golf in Germany. So my brother and I basically took part in a lot of the tournaments, played a lot of...
Is he as good as you?
He's better. He used to be a +2 or something. We played age group tournaments out of Bavaria and Germany, and you basically travel every weekend to see a different place, to take part in a tournament. And I remember traveling to Hamburg, and I think there was a par3 over water, pretty tough pin. And while everyone is just hitting it straight to the pin, I saw like a kicker slope on the left that would just tickle the ball down towards the hole. It's basically the same thing that we just talked about, undulated greens and having multiple routes to the hole. So trying to be creative. And I couldn't resist to think about like, wow, did someone actually think about this and build this on purpose, or what is going on here? So that's kind of my light bulb moment where I was like, wait, there's actually a whole profession about this? That's insane. And so cool. I want to do that.
You go on to study landscape architecture at Munich, the Munich University of Applied Sciences. I understand that your German professors may have been a bit skeptical as to whether or not there was a career in golf course design, certainly in Germany anyway.
Yeah, the golf boom in Germany was in the 60s, 80s, and 90s. That's when the demand for golf courses was higher than the market had to offer. There's still a course being built every so often, but the whole point of my professors were I wouldn't be able to dedicate a whole career to it. So they really thought I just want to stay in Germany. But I'm someone who's always thinking outside the box a bit. Yes, I've been working in Germany, but mainly I'm outside of Germany.
As part of your studies, you got a scholarship as part of the Erasmus program offered to third-level students in Europe to further their educational and personal growth. And you would go off to Sheffield. I'm just wondering how formative that period was in terms of your development from a golfing IQ perspective, obviously specifically in relation to furthering your career in golf course design.
It was very formative. I finally had a professor who encouraged me to specialize in golf course design. They helped me adapt my essays to golf and also encouraged me to travel and study and see places. So that didn't really happen in Germany. But I was on the road basically most of my Erasmus scholarship. So I just wanted to see places, and then I was able to write a little report afterwards, and that would be credit to my score. So it was nice to being able to adapt my program a little bit.
I'm assuming you did a bit of a circuit around the golf courses in the UK while you were in Sheffield. Obviously, Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, Cumbria, Merseyside are all within a striking distance of the Steel City. Any particular places jump out to you? Obviously, Scotland probably isn't too far away either. So,
yeah, not at all. I haven't really even thought about Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, Cumbria, and Merseyside. I didn't really know where to start. It was the first time that I actually had to think about, oh, wow, now you have time and you're free to go and explore. So I didn't really know where to start. I always heard about the Old Course, North Berwick, Carnoustie, Gleneagles. I spent a lot of time in a rental car driving up to Scotland with a road atlas on the side that was prior to Google Maps and finding a lot on the internet. Now I think it's quite ridiculous that I didn't know about great English golf courses. Like Herbert Fowler's Abbeydale was just around the corner. But you have to start somewhere, and I'm happy to travel, explore, and catch up now.
That's the ironic thing about English golf. Whereas Scottish authorities and the Irish authorities spend a lot of money marketing the place as great for golf. English golf, you can make an argument, is deeper and has more volume and variety than either Scotland or Ireland.
I think there's part of it is true what you just said. I would refer to England more of a sleeping beauty. A lot of people connect golf and golf's origin with Scotland, and therefore that's where you have to go. But if you think about the likes of Rye and some of the seaside courses down in the south, they're magnificent. And then you have the London Heath belt and there's so much variety in there. So yes, there's a lot of variety. They're not advertising it that much because I think they're pretty happy being a members club most of the time, and that's all right with them. But I think that part of Scotland's being so focused on golf courses and visitors is mainly because its origin in golf, and there's a lot of history around Scotland. So I think that's why there's a couple routes that tourists just go.
Your diploma thesis was entitled Plants on Golf Courses, Recommendations for Southeastern Europe. Just wondering what recommendations you may have developed as part of your thesis.
It might sound very simple. Don't plant shallow routing trees on a golf course. There's too much fighting over nutrients and water and all that kind of stuff. There's also bad spots to plant trees on a golf course where they cause a lot of trouble down the road, leaf litter or safety. It sounds very straightforward and easy, but you'd be surprised how often you see the easiest mistakes being done and just planting in the weirdest spots, and it's like scratching your head, like, why did you do that?
As Harry Coe said, trees should be part of the scenery, not part of the stage. So they have a place, but the right trees in the right place.
Yeah.
You would go on to do a little bit of greenkeeping at Golf Club Munich Eichenried, host of the European Tour's BMW Open. Just wondering, first of all, how long you were on the greens team there?
It was just a season. I helped prep for the BMW and mowed, squeegeed. It rained a lot, and caddied at the tournament for Nick Heidfeld. So it was just for a couple months, and it was nice to see it from a different perspective than just playing a golf course.
Is that where you were first introduced to operating larger equipment?
Not really large equipment, but I learned to run the bunker rake, as in learning the bunker rake for raking bunkers, and not to use to highlight and finish contours. So it was merely operational. First time I was on an excavator or bulldozer was at the Renaissance Club in Scotland for the internship with Tom.
Just apropos your first introduction to larger equipment, you strike me as a pretty practical sort of person. I'm just wondering, did that come naturally to you in terms of controlling something of that sort of size?
No, honestly, it's time and getting enough opportunities to perfect. And I mostly learned in clay, so that was in Bordeaux. And that's a whole different story. Like, you really have to commit. If you're using a bulldozer, you have to commit to put down the blade and just really go for it. It might look ugly for a little while, but then you just have to rough shape it. And it is what I'm just saying. It's rough shapes. That taught me a lot. And again, just having the time to use those opportunities to try something, try and error. That's how you learn.
Just finally, on the greenkeeping side of things, I'm just wondering if you have been able to utilize anything from those days in the realm of designing and building golf courses.
The other thing that I learned about that time in Eichenried was, don't build a golf course in a swamp.
Golf course in a swamp?
Pretty much. That's why we had to squeegee that much.
That's water table and
very
just
low, yeah.
Wet feet for the grass.
Yeah.
Which isn't great.
No.
So that's a really good learning then. So
don't build a golf course in a swamp.
That's good advice. So 2011, you commenced your internship with Renaissance, the least appropriate, at Renaissance Club in Scotland. It must have been exciting to get stuck into the internship program at the home of golf.
Especially if you're located between two of the greatest golf courses in the world, Muirfield and North Berwick.
Yeah, I'm assuming that necessitated you potentially getting out to play a little bit at North Berwick.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, North Berwick was easy. Muirfield was a bit harder. We were a group of interns, so it was Sarah Mess, Ben Wesco, and Todd Jerome who were involved, and a shout out to them.
Sarah was the one that edited Tom's Getting to 18, yeah?
Yeah. She's
a teacher now.
She is, yeah. She's a math teacher, and prior to the Renaissance Club and that internship, she has been working with Renaissance Golf Design, and she was in the office basically and did a bit of routing work and helped Tom draw a couple of the plans and maps. And so she was no one new to Renaissance Golf, but she came over after her master's degree in landscape architecture and started as an intern back in the program, wanting to be a golf course architect. It was amazing. It was a great time, a lot of kind of slightly competitive rounds of golf. And Sarah and I were sharing a room in the beginning on site of the Renaissance Club because, as you know, the Renaissance Club was opened, I think, 2007.
Yeah.
And so they had a little bit of accommodation on site, and Tom was so gracious to share a bunk bed with a lad, and Sarah and I got Tom's room basically for the first 2 weeks. So every evening we were teased with a sunset view over Muirfield, and it was like right there. And it was just a carrot dangling in front of us. So we sometimes jumped the wall to Muirfield, and back in 2011, it was a gentleman only course with, I think there was very limited ladies allowance. So, but you don't want to stretch your luck too much and respect the rules, but we tried to see something.
So you did see something then. That's good to hear. Just wondering, in terms of the Renaissance Project, what sort of responsibilities were yourself and Sarah and the other interns tasked with?
Well, as an intern, you basically start with the finish work. You're picking stones, you're hand raking, you're shoveling, then you're getting on a sand pro and you finish those areas. And that's what I was saying before, like learning how to run a bunker rake was nice, that I already kind of knew what I was doing, but sand proing areas, later checking and leveling tees, at some point flipping a sand pile with an excavator, tracking something in, trying myself on the dozer in a native area. So you just advance and they just try, like, do you have a good eye? And I think the absolute treat that I got at the end was floating a green.
Plate aside, you might get a kick out of this. So you're obviously known as Moser on a dozer, but locally you're known as Digger Girl.
I know.
I assumed you did know.
I know, yeah.
Isn't just apropos another project a little bit later on in your career with Renaissance is you got to work at the Loop at Forest Dunes. Obviously, initially there was just a Tom Weisskopf course, but the business was purchased by Lou Thompson and Sam Matthias in 2011, and Renaissance delivered a fully reversible 18-hole course. So 2 golf courses for the price of 1, essentially, which opened for play in 2016. For listeners that may not know, can you please let us know what a reversible golf course is and what and who perhaps may have inspired Tom Doak to consider, envision and deliver, as I said, 2 courses for the price of 1?
Tom mentioned that he found the concept of the reversible course very fascinating ever since he read Tom Simpson's The Architectural Side of Golf. I don't know if you know, there's a chapter in the appendix in the back for private estates to get most out of the acreage, and the idea of crossing holes, zigzagging, playing the course backwards, just like basically very experimental and just like what would work, what not. And places like the old course was fully reversible at some point. And it's cool that they're actually having these events nowadays where for a couple of days you can actually play it backwards. So it's really nice that they're trying that again. But what does that actually mean? It means that Forest Dunes, you play 1 through 18, and then the next day it's the reverse way, which means you're playing from 1 tee, which is slightly different location. So you're playing from 1 tee to 17 green, and then from 18 tee to 16 green. And that way you just go backwards. So that might sound very weird. And there are definitely a couple of challenges with it. Like if you're building greens mostly receptive, like you're having greens that are tilting back to front, so your ball has like a stop in the back. If you're fully playing it backwards 180 degrees, then all of a sudden all of your greens are tilting away. That's not fun. And Tom, being Tom, is very creative in greens and, you know, what would work, and also playing with the routing, not being always playing 180 degrees, but sometimes it's 90 degrees, 260 degrees, like whatever angle it is, what makes sense on this natural side, and how to find great golf holes in both directions. And I think they're a really interesting set of greens that run away and tilt left to right, or even have like multiple tilting directions. So I think that's really interesting. And the fascinating fact is that you're playing it one direction the one day, and whenever you play it the second day, you really have to turn around and think about, oh, which hole is that? What was that yesterday again? Like, it feels like you're playing it in the right direction both ways. And that was very, very important to Tom, is that you're not in favor over the other one, which is kind of what happened to the old course.
But I guess it's a resort, ultimately, at the end of the day. It's a commercial operation. And as you say, if they're alternating between, be it clockwise or anti-clockwise, or however they denote or differentiate the either or routing, then ultimately, with 3 golf courses there, 1 plus 1 plus 1.
Right.
The guest is staying for 3 days as opposed to 2 days.
Yeah. The whole task that Lou Thompson approached Tom was like, I want an additional course so people would stay at Forest Dunes. And Tom presented a map of the golf course, and just one way. So he just presented the one routing, and Lou Thompson looked at it. This is actually, Tom should actually be on this podcast.
Ta-da!
So Tom, I wasn't there for the presentation. It's actually not right that I'm talking here and telling the story, but I think I've been listening to the story quite a few times, so I can share it. So Tom was presenting the map of the golf course, and Lou looked at it and was like, yeah, it looks like a nice golf course. It's not like blowing me away. It looks like a decent golf course. Good job. And Tom takes away the upper map, and below is the same footprint, but just the other way around. And Lou was apparently scratching his head, and it's like, I don't understand. It's like, it's the same footprint. You get 2 in 1. So you would have people stay and play it on day 1 in this direction, and the next day it's playing the other direction. And we're making sure that quality of the golf is very enjoyable in both directions, and there's not a favorite, so that people want to play both and not just come, oh, it's a blue day. So,
Of course, regular listeners will know that course designer Ali McIntosh is a friend of mine and someone whose opinion I value and appreciate. Ali considers the Loop at Forest Dunes to be one of the very best modern courses of the past 30 years in terms of fit, harmony, intrigue, and most importantly, camouflage. I mean, one of the things he mentioned was when you're playing the other routing, you can't see the tees.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing. You don't want to notice the tee box for the other way around. It's tough. How do you build bunkers and make them visible from both sides? Where do you place them? So you're not in the landing area for this way, but you're adding enough interest. How to create the interest and variety in the greens. Like I said before, if it's tilting away from you one day, it would be very receptive the next day. So you just have to find an acceptable way to and variety in greens. Yeah, receptivity is the complete opposite if you reverse it.
So maybe a little in your golf and travel. A serious baller, as I said, as I found out in our recent 9-hole match at St. Patrick's, again, thanks to Chris Breen. So you supported the half set on the day, including a beautiful hickory putter. I believe there's a story behind that particular club.
Yeah, well, I got it from Ray Schuneman, who's a longtime friend of Tom's, and for some, I don't know exactly the reason, but he got into hand forging and clubs and putters and, sourcing the material, the right iron, the right hickory, the weight distribution. And he heard that I play hickories, and he had this hickory putter made previously. And when he heard that I play hickory, he thought, like, this is actually a really nice present to me. And I'm forever grateful for the present. Unfortunately, he got his own medicine because it was my first day. Like, he gave me the putter, and we played St. Patrick's afterwards, and it was a match between him and Tom Doak, and Billy Getty and I were teaming up, and I made every putt. Billy Getty came over to me and was like, let's not send them home after 10 holes. And I'm like, well, I can't help myself. This is actually magical.
Did you download a dog license or something like that?
It was really great. And then, I don't know, at some point, the magic just wore off a little bit. But it was just, it has a beautiful weight to it. And I love hitting it. Sometimes the head falls off, so I have to give it a good knock back on. But yeah, it's just, I think it's the coolest thing. And having Ray putting so much time and effort in it and really getting into the detail is just, that's really cool and such a amazing present to have. Like, yeah, I'm honored.
That brings us nicely onto your hickory golf. As I said, you can not only play with modern equipment, but also hickory equipment. In fact, your 2 German championships and 1 French hickory championships would attest to that fact. Just wondering how you got started with hickories.
I've got started with hickories due to one person in particular, and that's Christoph Meister. He helped me with some reports that I had to write about golf course architecture in Germany. He's a historian who's digging into archives and, looking at photos and getting a lot of it sorted for clubs. And he has been writing a lot of the historic annual books for German golf courses. So I was in contact with him ever since Sheffield, and he kept bugging me. He was like, well, we're having this hickory championship. You're invited. Come and play with us. And it was always like far away. In, I think, 2017, it was in Feldafing, which is an hour from Augsburg. So I couldn't say no. And he gave me his set and caddied for me, and I didn't really have any idea about how far I hit the clubs, so no distance control whatsoever. But it felt beautiful and great, and for some reason I was a little.
Were you
sore.
using modern balls or old balls, or?
It was a small ball. It was modern, but kind of set up for the hickories. So it was a lot of fun, and I just loved.
You won,
and I won.
Wow.
Yeah. Like for some reason, I was the lowest score, which is mind blowing because again, like it was the first time I played hickories, and I had no idea how long I hit. Like
class is permanent, though. To be fair,
right.
And you did it again, and then you did it in France.
Yeah. By then I have my own playing set and played a couple times. I played a couple times here. There are beautiful golf courses here that you can play with hickories. It makes a lot of sense. Critch Island being one of them is magical.
Kilspindie is another one, isn't it?
Oh, Kilspindie in Scotland is fantastic. Yeah.
Say Critch with hickories, I'd say is wild.
Oh, it is. Yeah. But it's so much fun. Honestly. But yeah, so I just love it. I think it's very calming and it's beautiful that you just swing easy and calm, and that's how you actually hit a pretty good ball.
Funnily enough, and I don't know if you picked this up yesterday, Bryson was out hitting hickories.
Oh yeah. I
dressed up like a hickory player. Plus
like
fours and the whole. Yeah, a mustache as well.
That's the only thing that I noticed. I was like, who's that?
Listen, for listeners considering dipping their toe in the hickory water, as it were, what advice would you have for them?
Just rent them. There are a couple of places where you can rent and try them out. And then in terms of swinging tips, swing it easy and calm and just don't go too crazy.
Where'd you get your clubs, by the way?
They were graciously given to me by someone on Golf Club Atlas. I had a question about how and where and what should I get, and someone DM'd me back like, oh yeah, he has like a couple more clubs and he's not using them, so if I restore them to my liking, that would probably be pretty good.
Result.
Yeah.
Golf Club Atlas has other functions other than debate on the intricacies of bunker placement and routing. We must get on to Pinehurst 10. Obviously, Renaissance built the new 10, the first new build at Pinehurst in almost 30 years. The first one, I think, since Fazio, the number 8 course was built in 96. We think about Pinehurst, the cradle of golf in the USA, trips off the tongue alongside NGLA, Chicago Golf Club, Merion, Philly Cricket Club, Shinnecock and the Cal Club. In other words, it's at the pinnacle of the game in North America. Throw in the Don and Ross influence, and that's someplace for your first leading role.
It's an absolute honor to be there, to be building something over there. So it's, as you point out, it's such a big place and has such a big influence on golf and golf course architecture. So being involved over there was just absolutely stunning.
In terms of the Pinehurst aesthetic, I guess 10 is the same, but not the same. I mean, as someone who's now spent some significant time in the Pine Barrens in North Carolina, perhaps you can paint a picture for us mere mortals who haven't been. What is the Pinehurst aesthetic?
Well, think about pine trees, therefore a light pine needle coverage on the ground. You have sandy soil peeking through, native plants, wiregrass, So that's kind of what you find over there.
This timeline just blows my mind. So for those that aren't aware, correct me if any of this is wrong. So April 2022, Mr. Doak gets a call from Tom Pashley from Pinehurst to see if Renaissance would be interested in taking on the Pinehurst 10 project.
And I was still in New Zealand at Tiari.
So you were then, obviously, the biggest issue, I guess, is permissions in terms of making something like this happen quickly, because it happened really quickly, or appears to have happened really quickly. But I think there was two guys on the staff, Bob Farron and Kevin Robinson, that essentially did the donkey work in terms of getting the permissions. So you were on a Carolinas road trip in October 22, as you said, post the Renaissance Cup beating of Mr. Doak. Your first visit was with a map, and I think you pitched solo because he caught COVID.
Yeah, that's correct. The idea was that I meet Tom in Pinehurst, but he canceled because he caught COVID in Ireland. So I just went by myself, and he sent me a map, and he's like, just walk it and see how you like it. And I liked it. And he's like, okay, you're pitching to the client tomorrow.
Cool.
So it's great.
The over and done, obviously, at this point in time, you're probably aware that you're going to be doing the job in terms of lead associate.
Yeah. He never pointed it out like, oh yeah, pitch it and you getting the job. It was like, now pitch it. Okay. And I pitched it and yeah.
December 22, you make a site visit with Tom this time to decide on clearance requirements for corridors. You're still waiting on a visa application.
Yep.
LeBar Golf Renovations basically have 80% of this done by January 23. That's pretty quick. You get your visa on the 16th of January and you're on a dozer on the 17th. 57 days straight post-arrival. I mean, the profession you've chosen could probably be best described as a vocation. 57 days straight would tend to suggest, and I appreciate there was time constraints, so you've got to get it done. Yeah.
Right. A lot of it is passion, and you pour your heart into it, and that's what you do. LeBar didn't clear the site. That was a local contractor. LeBar is basically, they do the construction, and they brought on a massive team and were able to really get things done quickly. And yeah, it's just, again, it's passion. If you love it, it's not work. So you're happy to spend a lot of time on it.
I understand you generally factor in about 10 months for construction.
Yeah, that's about right.
The case to 10, I think the last green was approved June 23. That's 5 months.
Yeah.
From start to finish.
Well, there's a lot, that came after, but last green approved. Sure, if you think about it, going back to St. Patrick's, Tom approved all the greens in 2019. The course was still not finished, but all the greens were finished, sure.
Yeah. God bless the North Carolinian weather. You're playing all 18 by September 23.
Yeah, easily. Yeah. Yeah, if you're using sod, it's actually really easy. It was all Bermuda sod that we sawed it. Only the greens, that way we pushed so hard with the greens. It's like you sprig the greens, and everything else was sodded. So tees, fairways, everything around bunkers. So you get a pretty good coverage straight away, and therefore you can play in September.
And opened 3rd of April 2024. Not even 15 months after you first jumped on the dozer. And that's just wild.
Yeah, it is. I'm still processing.
Yeah. And by all accounts, it's an unbelievable success thus far. So, I mean, it's great to see. But I mean, just maybe talk about the raw material, what you have to work with. So obviously, known as the Pinehurst Sand Mines, I believe.
Yes, it's about 900 acres. And it's not completely known yet what Pinehurst has in mind of what to develop there, but I believe there will be a lot more to come. Our course has about, I think it's a 290 acre footprint, and it has about 75 feet of elevation change. There are 2 lakes and a lot of beautiful old pine trees, a lot of young pine trees. It used to be a sand mine, therefore the name. It used to be a peach farm, therefore the lakes. So there's a lot of history on the property, and we're trying to get into the history a little bit and acknowledge the place and what it's been through. What I've not mentioned, a couple holes play through the old pit links, which is a Dan Maples design. And most of the pit links is actually east of our course. There are only, I think it's 6 holes that actually played through what is now our course. And we tried to knit together the landscape, and Tom found a slightly different routing, utilizing some of the openings. So it's not completely different. And if you're looking hard, you probably see a couple of the reminiscence of it. But honoring the history of the place, that's kind of how you incorporate some of the sand mining features and trying to design your strategy around these features on specific holes. So yeah.
Just wondering, how sandy is Pinehurst really?
It depends where you look. There are areas that drain straight down and in the sand profile, and then there are areas which have enough loam so surface drains and, you get washouts.
So as we've said, you were the lead associate. I'm just wondering how different it was to be the editor as opposed to the edited.
Yeah, I see the main difference in the titles that you're more involved in organizing the flow, like preparing at the right time for Tom's visits. So you can't build the green if the area isn't cleared and grubbed. So, having everything lined up at the right time was pretty essential. And I think that's a big difference between the roles. You have also a greater voice in input in making decisions about the architecture and strategies. So having worked with Tom for so many years, he values my opinion, and being on site so much, you stare at a lot of the golf holes and think about like how you want them to turn out and what kind of makes sense. So I would say you have a greater voice there and a bigger impact. At number 10, I was pulled off the machine constantly to make decisions. So it's very different, or for me at least, it was very different to run the job because I initially thought that I would actually spend a lot of time on the machine. But machine time is fun. I love the creative part of shaping, and it's very new for me to rely massively on a crew. And I think they did a pretty good job.
I've heard him say, just apropos your role at number 10, was obviously an opportunity to take a step back and let the other people do the cool stuff.
Yeah, that's for sure. But you also have to point into the right direction and where you wanted this to go. And like what I said before is like, trust Eric. Yeah, you have to have the team that trusts you. And
funny that you mentioned Mr. Iverson again. You had a pretty cool guest star cast in relation to Schneider, Slawnik, Conant, Iverson and Doak. I believe there was a talent window between mid-January and the start of April, which basically gave you access to all the talent.
Yeah, it was insane. Like it was very, very busy, and hence we were able to really finish all the greens until June. Yeah, there was a lot going on multiple holes. And again, like, especially in the beginning, my role was mostly directing and organizing and making sure that everything flows and there's no stop to it. And if someone is asking me, where do you want me? I could point like straight on an area that needs to get shaped.
Okay, so maybe a little bit about the 8th hole at Pinehurst 10, a 350-yard par 4, which I believe incorporates part of the old Dan Maples course, the Pit, an old sand aggregate mining area, unlike anything else on the property.
Yeah, it's actually playing backwards. So the mound in front of the green was one of the tee boxes and obviously got reshaped, or shaved down quite a bit actually. But that was a tee box that was playing back to the forward tee kind of into that a little niche there. I think it was like a 165-yard par 3. We used the corridor slightly different, widened it. One of the things that Dan Maples did was you had a wild terrain but very tight golf course. Too tight for some people, I would say. So we widened it, turned it around, found a really cool spot for the green with that old tee box in front of it. And it was always the question, like, are we going to shave down any of these mounds and sand dunes that the mining operation left? And I thought they were pretty cool, and it would be cool to keep some of the history in place. And Brian Schneider, who shaped the green with Blake Conant, we looked at each other at some point during the process of figuring out what to do. And I was like, this just reminds me so much of De Paan in the Netherlands. And it's a beautiful cold golf course and incorporates so many of these mounds that are naturally there. And instead of always putting like a tee on top of the mound,
difference being they're glacial deposits as opposed to
mining operations.
operation.
Sure. So, okay, slightly different background, but same thing. Instead of putting like a tee on every mound, so you walk up to the tee and then play downwards to the hole, he utilizes them differently. You have strategy of the tee where placing the ball for a better angle into the green comes into play. So it's just amazing how Colt did it at the pond and variety of and usage of it. You play through 2 of them. On hole 6, you have the strategy of like, if you drive it to the right side, you have a really good angle into the green and good peek and look at the green. On the left side, you're completely blocked out. So all of that came in mind looking at this property where hole 8 is sitting on and some of the other holes. And, we just wanted to do something different. And Brian and I just looked at it and like, yeah, why don't we do something similar to the pond? And that's kind of what we did.
I understand you and the team may have had to build some additional elements on some of the surrounding holes to somewhat maybe mirror the features.
There were a couple of them somewhere else. And, we just thought it would be kind of cool to pick up that theme and carry it a little bit further than just 6 has a couple of these mounds. And sure enough, 7 does. And playing down 14 and you have one of these big mounds in the background and one of them in the foreground. So sure enough, like the ground would be different than flat. So we adjusted to that, but we didn't build like a massive mound like we have on 8 to build something completely blind. So we didn't do that. Sure enough, like picking up the theme and having some of them every now and then where they made sense. Yeah.
Derek Duncan wrote a cool piece on Pioneers 10 in Golf Digest recently, which alludes to a design ethos, which I think can be found in spades within a few Renaissance courses that I've played. He writes as follows: the architecture demands diligence in getting drives into high positions, then if coming into greens from proper angles, turns towards wanting to help move balls inward and internally. Going back to Bobby Jones's quote that we spoke about earlier, it pays to think about what you're doing at a Renaissance design. The collective may not be looking to mess with your head, but there's different answers and riddles to the puzzles that reward the thinking golfer.
Yeah, and there are many ways to conquer the course, different angles, and ultimately you just have to find your own route.
So we'll move on to the St. George's Hill project, which obviously yourself and Brian Schneider and Chris Haspel and Clyde Johnson and Jasper Miners are involved in. Just wondering initially, obviously St. George's Hill is a Harry Colt masterpiece, Weybridge in Surrey, hiding in plain sight as it were. Just wondering how you'd assess initially the Colt and company's influence on golf design in general.
He's one of the first names that come to mind if you talk about Mount Rushmore of golf course architects. Like, he should be up there. His influence is unbelievable. His diversity, variety, genius has so many facets that it is really hard to grasp, and that's making him so brilliant.
How excited are you and the guys to be involved in restoring what he may have considered to be his very best golf course?
Over the moon. St. George's Hill is one of my favorite courses. I've been charmed by it ever since I first played in 2013. Fun fact, it was actually just before my trip to Donegal. That was one of the courses that I played before coming here.
You've had a few visits back since, I suspect.
Yes, that's true. And especially in the past year while we were doing our master plan, which is now in place. So hopefully we can agree on the scope of work and move on.
I know it's top secret, so I'm not going to pry too much, but I guess just in general terms, as you know, I've been lucky enough to get to know Jasper Miners over the last few years. It'd be great to get an assessment on how important his particular involvement is in relation to generally informing master plans that, I guess, it's the same sort of question as what Christoph has done for you in Germany.
Yeah.
How important is that historical analysis and trawl through various resources and libraries, and like Jasper's like a bloody bloodhound. He's
Yes.
pretty It's like a dog with a bone, actually. A bloodhound with a bone, in fact.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I think as with any true restoration, a proper historian is needed. And Jasper has been digging in archives for us and found some amazing photos and articles about St. George's Hill. So his work is the base of what we will do, as we don't dare to put our name above cold.
Like quite literally up in attics and underwater tanks and...
Absolutely. Like, yeah, he's quite adamant about finding stuff. And if he just heard just a little bit of a possibility, maybe finding something in a different archive, he was going for it. So that is priceless. And I think that his search is one of the most profound and in-depth research is so important for us. The course needs to be preserved and protected for the next generations to come. And the easiest way to do so is by listening to Colt and what he has done and at this specific site. So that's the thing, like every architect is doing something slightly different, which kind of makes sense. This is what we talked about before. There's a reason why we didn't build Royal County Down greens on St. Patrick's. We're building St. Patrick's greens on St. Patrick's. And Colt did the same thing. Like every architect should do the same thing. It's like you honor the uniqueness and identity of the place, and having such a profound and in-depth research that Jasper did basically gives Colt a voice and describing what the greens should do and seeing the bunkers and all that kind of stuff.
It must really aid buy-in when you can actually not only talk about what was there, but actually show people that this is what we're trying to do and this is why we're trying to do it and this is what he said about it. And I believe they didn't have a huge amount of stuff.
They had, funny enough, they had...
so they had a map on the wall, which...
Yes, they had the as-built map on their clubhouse wall, and I don't think they ever looked at it in depth and realized how much that is worth. They allowed Jasper to scan it, and then once it was scanned, you can Photoshop it slightly so the colors pop a little bit more. So Jasper did all of that, and very carefully, and then laid it over what is there right now, and then just assessed, okay, well, your fairway should be all the way out to here. Oh, wow. Yeah, you can still see like a reminiscence of the old fairway or a bunker or something there. And we were all scratching our heads, but just in admiration of the place.
I look forward to seeing what you guys commence with, I think, early next year. But anyway, don't have to answer that question. You recently appeared on the Friday Golf podcast with Garrett Morrison. And I got the feeling... I may be wrong, but I got the feeling that all may not be well with regard to golf course design in Germany. Forgive me if my impression of what you said was incorrect. Was it?
Yes and no. I don't think there's a country where everything in golf course architecture is done absolutely perfect. We just talked about Colt's masterpiece and how to respectfully restore it. There's a lot of not knowing in Germany, as is in other countries. But it's heartbreaking to watch what some architects suggest or how improper the construction methods are. In Berlin, I've been watching the contractor put in better billy bunkers. And yeah, it is. And the construction method, asks to over-excavate the bunker, but the construction company never built better billy bunkers, so they didn't. And once they installed it, like the sand level was tying into the top of the bunker face, and it was just like a sea of sand, and it didn't really have like a face. So you just scratch your head and just wonder, why do they do this, and why do they not know better, and why are people going for the cheapest bid in places instead of protecting the architecture and really doing the job of get into the backgrounds of your architects and call up some of the clubs and see if they were happy with your work. And unfortunately, that's not really happening so many times. And it's inconvenient to call someone in outside of Germany or outside of your country and really check on it. But, it should be so easy to just shoot an email and just ask a couple questions, how happy you were with someone's work. And I'm pretty sure they're happy to give you either a raving review or putting you into the right direction.
The term hidden gem is a much used turn of phrase I'm pretty well up in some of these places. However, you recently mentioned a German one to me, which I'd never heard of. And Christoph Meister is probably not going to thank me for bringing this up, given the fact that he wants to keep it a secret. But I'm hoping you can introduce the listeners to Norderney. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Norderney. Yeah, it's the oldest links course in Germany. It was built in 1922.
Links courses in Germany?
There's
also links courses in Holland.
And it's not far away. It's funny. It's sitting on Norderney Island. So it started to be like a 3-hole golf course, and then it got extended in 27. And it was like a local architect.
Sorry, 3-hole?
Yeah, it used to be just 3 holes, and it got extended to like 9 holes, and I think at some point it was 14 holes. Yeah, and then it just had a tough time, and they reduced it down to 9 holes. So what's left is 9 holes, and you find like what links golf courses is and are. They're very natural, and you have some blind shots, and you have some punch bowls, and all of that, and Norderney has it, and it's not talked about. And it's really sad because it's very obviously struggling, and with a little bit of money, they would do a lot better than they do right now. That's one place that I would love to help, not making a huge amount of money, but just helping out and getting some of these facts right and helping them establish something that stands the time.
Well, thank you for introducing it to us, Norderney. You'll be glad to know we're now finally entering the finish straight. Look, you've inspired me to augment this section ever so slightly. So from now on, the bucket list question will have 2 parts. The new section assumes that I'm a genie offering you one wish, related to an ideal construction, restoration, or renovation project anywhere in the world. What and where is the project, and why have you chosen?
So beside Norderney, obviously, where I would love to help, it would be Marion Hollins and Emmett DeVere's Women's National Golf and Tennis Club on Long Island. It used to be just a women's golf course, and it was struggling after a couple of years, and it was bought by the men's club next door. And because the men wanted to play it, they extended it. And the fun fact is that it's exactly the opposite of what you normally find. So normally the club is actually selling off some land, and then they have to reduce the golf course, which means it's not long enough anymore, and they could not bring back the golf course anymore. In this case, they actually purchased more land and extended it, but the original golf course is still there. I don't think that the club is particularly interested in putting it back, but if they would ever be interested, I'd be happy if they would consider me.
And quite ironically, I think this was down the road from the Lido originally.
Yeah, exactly.
Not the Wisconsin one. The actual one.
No, the actual. That's what I'm saying. It's on Long Island. Yeah. So, yeah.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that with us. So we're going to back up the ideal project question with our long-standing question related to your bucket list courses. You can interpret this question however you wish. The courses may be repeat or new plays. The choice is yours.
Well, I haven't been to Japan or South America. I haven't been to Africa and Middle East. So there's still a lot to explore. But I believe my next trips will be to the East Coast and maybe Canada.
South of Dublin?
Maybe south of Dublin, but also continental Europe there's so much more to explore and look at. So I wouldn't mind to see a couple of the courses again.
Which ones are calling out to you?
Well, you can't not stop by Depan, and Fontainebleau is one of my all-time Simpson favorites, and there's some amazing golf courses. There are great golf courses in Belgium, and I haven't been up to Denmark, so a lot to explore. Poland would be something. Maybe going to Greece, maybe exploring a little more in Italy. So yeah, just traveling a lot.
It's no wonder your profile says world traveler, in addition to shaper and designer. Finally, what 2 golf books would you recommend to anybody looking to augment their golfing libraries?
There are golf books that shouldn't be missed in the library, and I would add some of the basics you can't get around. That would be the before mentioned Simpson book, The Architectural Side of Golf, like just putting that back into your mind. That was where Tom was reading about the reversible course and the appendix. It's such a great book, and the sketches are really, really beautiful. So that would be one of my recommendations. And then the other one is Robert Hunter's The Links, the way he's talking about bunkers and bunker styles. And I think that is very, very special. And no wonder the cover of the book is St. George's Hill. I think it's the 8th hole where the bunker actually eats into the green. It's very dramatic and such a beautiful case of beautiful bunkering. So yeah, those 2 books are hard to miss. So if you don't have them in your library, they're a must.
Yeah, and look, the price of the book alone is worth shelling out just for the story of his golfing adventures with John Ball Jr. at Royal Liverpool. Listen, Angela, it's been an absolute pleasure to share some time and some stories with you. Many thanks again for making it happen. On behalf of the golf playing public, thank you for the care and attention that you pour into your creative work. The golfing world is better for having you and your colleagues in it. Finally, continued success with all the projects that come your way. You deserve it. Bis zum nächsten Mal.
Vielen Dank.
Many thanks for tuning in. We really do hope you enjoyed the show. If you don't yet follow us on Twitter, X, Instagram, or indeed our Substack account, you can do so at Firm and Fast Golf on X, at Firm and Fast Golf Podcast on Instagram, and at the Firm and Fast Golf Podcast occasional newsletter on Substack. Finally, if you're so inclined, you could leave us a star rating or even a review on your podcast platform of choice. It really would be appreciated. Until the next time, happy golfing.